Well, the regime did delay telling its own people about the outbreak of the coronavirus, and as a consequence, people didn't take the necessary precautions. And today, Iran has the highest death rate in the world of coronavirus. You have 66 who've died, 1,500 are infected. Those are the official numbers. We know the numbers are much higher than that. I saw an interview with a doctor in the Khuzestan province who said that the regime covered it up for a month, and then once it was clear that they had an epidemic, the regime wasn't prepared for it.
You've offered assistance, but you're also trying to keep the screw turned on the maximum pressure sanctions campaign. So how do you find the right balance in this, in terms of a humanitarian response to this, but at the same time, in a sense, exacerbating the problems of Iran's leaders?
Well, our sanctions have always made exceptions for food and medicine and medical devices. We have made an offer of assistance, and the regime rejected it, which is a mistake. I think the United States is the largest provider of humanitarian assistance in the world, and we have a very proud record over the 40 years of this regime's history. Whenever you have a medical health crisis or a natural disaster, the United States makes an offer to be helpful to the people. The longest suffering victims of the Iranian regime are its own people, and the coronavirus is just the latest example of it.
So let's talk about the nuclear question, because obviously that's right at the center of your brief. I mean, the Iranians have said they're not going to engage as long as President Trump's in office. Is that true, do you think?
Well, we hope the regime does come to the table. From the very beginning of President Trump's presidency, he's made very clear that he'd be willing to sit down with the Iranians. He has now met 3 times with Kim Jong-un, and he has made many offers to the Iranian regime, and we have provided many diplomatic off-ramps in the context of a maximum economic pressure campaign, but the regime keeps rejecting diplomacy. We would like to resolve our differences with the regime diplomatically. They have used military force.
How close do you think your two countries came to war in January?
I don't think we came that close to war in January. The president has said that the Iranian regime has never won a war and never lost a negotiation. And we own the upper rungs of the escalation ladder at all times, and the regime understands this.
But if those missiles had killed American servicemen, the ones fired at Al Assad Air Base and Erbil, you would have been drawn into a conflict, wouldn't you? It was fortunate happenstance that they didn't kill anyone.
Well, we very much believe that it is not in Iran's interest to get into an escalatory cycle with the United States because they know they would lose. And so as a consequence, we feel like that we put the right policy in place to restore deterrence. And that partly happened when the president ordered strikes in Iraq and Syria after the American contractor was killed against Kataib Hezbollah sites. And then on January 2nd, he ordered the killing of Qasem Soleimani, which was a big step toward restoring deterrence that was lost under the Iran nuclear deal.
I mean, I know you're going around to the other key European players as well in this, but when you talk to people, London, Paris, Berlin, there seems to be a consensus that although it is a stasis at the moment, it's quite a dangerous one. I mean, we could wake up any morning to find out that an Iranian proxy had attacked American interests somewhere in the Middle East, and then we'd be right back toe-to-toe again, wouldn't we, with the prospect of imminent military operations.
But I think everything you just described could also have been said before the strike on Qasem Soleimani. This is a regime that has a 40-year history of using terrorism as a tool of statecraft. And so if you want to make a difference in their behavior, you have to restore deterrence. And deterrence is not static, it's dynamic. You can lose it very quickly, and gaining it back requires some time. But by making very clear to the regime that we will attack if we are attacked first. Qasem Soleimani was plotting attacks, mass casualty attacks in the region against American diplomats and against American soldiers. And the president took the right decision to save American lives.
We've never really seen the evidence for that, though, have we? That there were imminent attacks. I know he had a long record of action against US interests, but the idea that there was an imminent threat, we've never seen the evidence for that.
Well, the evidence itself, and I've seen all the intelligence, it's highly compartmented and it gets at sources and methods. And so some of that intelligence has been shared with the United States Congress. If you look at the president's entire national security cabinet, there was a unanimous decision that the dangers of not taking the strike were greater than the dangers of taking it.
You've had moments, the US has had moments in the last few months where they've openly said that they're not really very happy with the position of the so-called E3, UK, France and Germany, on the nuclear deal. That the fact that those three European countries really stick to the idea that that's the only show in town for resuming diplomatic progress irks the US. Do you think they're any less attached to that Obama-era deal now than they were several weeks ago?
Prime Minister Johnson has said that the Iran deal has many, many deficiencies. It's a bad deal, and he has called for a Trump deal. And so we would like to get to a new and better deal that covers not just Iran's nuclear threats, but also its missile threats and its regional aggression. We want to take a truly comprehensive approach to this. I think that in some of the European capitals, there still is a deep attachment to the Iran nuclear deal, but this deal starts expiring in 8 months. In October, the UN arms embargo on the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism expires. And it's going to continue to expire in remaining years. So the United States, we have pulled forward the expiration date of the Iran deal because we don't want the regime and its proxies to be stronger when the deal expires. Being outside of the deal gives us a much better position to accomplish our objective that Iran never acquires a nuclear weapon.
I'm just wondering, I mean, obviously crystal ball gazing is fraught with risk for everyone, but with the Iranian leadership saying we won't talk seriously while President Trump is still in office, the situation frozen as it were on the ground, still tense, when might we reasonably see progress diplomatically to ease this?
That really is a question for the regime. The president, for the 3 years of his presidency, has made clear that he would sit with the Iranian regime, and they keep saying no. But I can't fix that. All that we can do is put in a place a foreign policy in a language that this regime understands. And they only understand economic pressure, diplomatic isolation, and the credible threat of military force. That's it. So we've got the right policy in place, and we would very much invite our European allies to join us in this strategy because it's working. We have a tactical disagreement over the Iran nuclear deal. We think that we're better off getting a better deal than living with the current deal, which we think puts Iran on a patient pathway to getting a nuclear weapon.
Let me just ask you about Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe and the others, including Americans who are in jail. How concerned are you about the coronavirus risk to them?
We're very concerned about it. The regime has not managed the epidemic. And if they're not managing the epidemic outside of Iran's prisons, you can only imagine how dangerous it is inside the prisons. So we are very worried about Nazanin and the 4 Americans and Bob Levinson. We have asked that they be released on a medical furlough, and we obviously don't have an ambassador in Iran, and so we use the Swiss ambassador to Iran. I've been in contact with him on a daily basis. I've also been in touch with my counterparts here in the British government to see how we can work together to get the people who are in Evin prison out.
And lastly, just on the diplomacy, I mean, we've seen sudden and quite dramatic movement in the Afghan talks. Does the forthcoming presidential election, do you think, from a US perspective, create a window for diplomacy?
We always hope to resolve our differences diplomatically. And the president is committed to doing that with the Islamic Republic. We're not looking for regime change. The future of Iran will be decided by the Iranian people. It will not be decided by the United States government. I think that's the right policy. But I really do think that if we can sit down with the Iranian regime, that we can work through a way forward that will ensure that Iran never has a nuclear weapon to threaten the Middle East. They've got to never have the technology of an ICBM, and they need to they need to be at peace with their neighbors. So these are the things which I think that we can get to an agreement on. And but in the meantime, we're denying this regime historic levels of revenues that it uses to destabilize the Middle East.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.